The following presentation is part of the Beyond the Blast Doors Network.
You've tuned into the Holochronicles.
Continue with the operation. Unit 5 and ready.
I love it, Josh. Welcome to the Holochronicles. Holla! That's like a that intro's a little fresher.
It's beefed up.
It's not completely different, but it's not the same. That's
different, but the same.
Yeah, we call that a variant.
Okay.
Hey,
In the collector world.
That's right. Like I said, welcome to the Holochronicles. We're so happy to be here, episode 37. And we want to remind you, we're in week 2 now of being part of the Beyond the Blast Doors Network. We made it. They have not kicked us out.
No.
They haven't kicked us out.
We don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody.
It's been a pretty fun week, though, in that regard, because in the last 7 days, because we had a pod last Monday.
Right.
We've gotten some new followers.
Right.
Some new eyeballs and earballs have been on us.
That's right.
Which has been pretty cool. Everyone else has put out a show.
We did 6 days.
6 days of content, including I took a stab at writing an article, Josh.
What the hell is going on?
I don't know what's going on, man.
This network's messing with your mind, man. You're writing.
It's weird.
Of course, like we said, 6 days of content. We want you to go and listen to, if you haven't already, go and listen to all the other pods out there. We've got Around the Galaxy. We've got the Bombad Cast Boys, which is crazy. They got some great stuff coming up. Beyond the Blast Doors Live, streaming Star Wars, postcards from Galaxy's Edge. I mean, we've got it all. And, of course, the Holochronicles. But, yes, thank you.
Time out, Josh. Time out.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
Hey, may the 4th be with you, Josh.
May the 4th be with you. And we get to drop our pod on the 4th.
That's right.
May the 4th.
May the 4th be with all of you guys. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that little bell, the alert button. We're doing everything on YouTube along with our pods, which you can find on all the major podcast networks. Let's get into it. We have a show today.
Oh my gosh, we have a show that consists of 2 things.
That's it.
2 things.
That's it.
We've got to show me your collection.
Yeah.
Which is pretty awesome. And then we've got an interview.
Correct.
And the interview, I'm super excited to share with you guys. Josh and I geeked out listening to executive producer of Mark Hamill's Pop Culture Quest.
Yes.
It's Mr. Scott Kinney, and I can't wait to get to that. But we do have one piece of business.
Yeah, we've got some business to take care of here on the Holochronicles. And, of course,
hit that drop.
We're going to do it.
Show me your collection.
At the time of this recording, we put out a hashtag Show Me Your Collection just 24 hours ago. It's Sunday night, but you're going to hear this Monday, hopefully. And this comes to us from a new follower of ours. He's probably been following us for 2-3 weeks now.
That's right.
We've mentioned him on our pod before. He wrote in a nice little question to us a week ago or so.
Right.
And now he hit us up with his collection, and it's Mr. Christopher Lee. No, not that Christopher Lee.
Not that Christopher
May he
Lee.
rest in peace.
Yes.
But at Mr. Chris Lee 24, if you're following him on the Twitters.
Well, and he basically started the Canadian invasion into the Holochronicles.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, was just mildly trying to get ahead in line and lots of sorries.
Yeah, sorry. Excuse me.
Sorry. Invasion
Sorry.
going on. Sorry.
Pardon me.
Invasion. Sorry.
Anyway, Chris has a really cool collection, and I'm glad he shared with us the shelves, the walls that he had filled up with Star Wars collectibles, toys, and memorabilia.
Such organization.
Yeah, he's pretty organized about it. Now, he did have a complaint, which is the second greatest complaint for any collector, is that I have more stuff, but they're in bins. I just don't have room for it all. But Josh,
The dilemma.
what is the most pressing collector dilemma?
I I believe it's to leave it in the box.
Or take it out and play.
That's the dilemma.
That's the dilemma.
Which is why we represent. Now, by the way, this is our own thing. Nobody else prompted us to make these. Minus SNL.
We have not ripped this off from Saturday Night Live at all.
Nor are we making fun of anyone else. Gee, Merry Christmas. All right. So I'm going to put it up on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, good for you. If you're not, go watch it on YouTube.
This is why you maybe want to catch at least part of our podcast on YouTube, because we do post pictures. I know we're going to talk about it, but talking about pictures isn't necessarily great audio.
No, it's not the best, but yeah.
But what you're going to see here first is, as Darth Vader would say, most impressive.
That's
It's a pop wall.
That's a pop wall
that he has super organized. And, we've actually talked about using baseball bat display cases to feature our vintage figures.
Yep.
But what he did, he let me count real quick.
There's
1, 2, 3,
9,
4, 5,
9.
6, 7, 8, 9 baseball bat display cases full of Funko Pops. They're the perfect size.
Look at them. I didn't even think of it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's like a collector tip 2.0, because you already brought that one up a while back on using those from Michaels. By the way, your local Michaels will have these, or a craft store.
We're not
sponsored by Michaels.
Not sponsored yet by Michaels, but shout out to Michaels. But yeah, and then he's got the ones that he wanted to keep in the boxes, resting on top. It's just super, super clear, super organized,
super nice.
Very good job.
I love symmetry, and that's what I'm seeing here. As a matter of fact, sorry, Chris, no offense, but you've got 2 boxes that are black on the left and then a blue and a white on the right. And so that one's messing. That's throwing me a bit. I hope it bothers you when you walk into your room. I think it does.
Yeah.
And look at this. It bothers him a little bit. He's like, hey, thanks for calling me out, Josh.
He saw it.
Sorry.
He saw it.
Sorry. I just couldn't come up with another couple of black boxes. So.
Yeah, he was like, dang it, he noticed. Swing on over to the next page there. What he also has, and I don't know if you can see it in the top left corner of that shelf, but he's got a Wampa snow globe.
And I know you're a snow globe lover.
Well, I have a snow globe.
You have, and it is your most unique.
It's the best $10 I've ever spent for my collection, that is.
I like that snow globe, though.
It's awesome. It's a Wampa with Luke hanging upside down from that scene in Empire Strikes Back. It's unique. You don't see a lot of Star Wars-themed snow globes around. I appreciate it, Chris. I think that's my favorite thing in your collection. But it's not Chris's favorite thing in his collection.
It's not. I will say from this picture right here, I do see some Elite Series.
Yes.
Which are fantastic. Actually, I own the R2, but I'm just looking at the
Power Droid?
Yeah, the Power Droid. It says it right there.
Gonk.
Gonk Droid is what I was going for. And then a Chewbacca. I don't know if I have him with a Porg. I like those Elites. Here's the only issue I have with the Elites. Just a quick sidebar.
Okay.
Because I decided to take them out of the box. You remember that?
Yeah.
I don't know if we potted that or not, but I decided, I'm taking all my Elite Series out of the box, keeping the boxes, of course. They do not stand up well. They're made of solid metal.
Yeah, they're heavy.
And so their little knee joints just give out. And I got downed characters, figures all over the place, just falling over. And when one of them goes down, they're heavy enough. They take out an entire legion with one drop.
It's a domino.
Kylo Ren in particular, he's so tall and lanky, took out, dominoed an entire back line.
Well, plus he's got a lightsaber too that extends his reach. Yeah.
I found Rose on the ground, and I felt bad.
Sorry, Rose.
I was like,
R.I.P.
Fandom menace going on here. Next.
Next picture. Yes. In this. Oh, wait. I did want to mention in that last picture that he did have a Jedi training ball alarm clock that was also very cool.
It wakes you up by zapping you in the ass.
Yeah. Hey.
Blast
I'm up.
Blast shield was down.
But getting back to what Chris believes, who, by the way, has been collecting since 1998 or so.
Nice.
So just before The Phantom Menace came out, right after the special editions, kind of right in that little window, he says he started collecting. His 2 favorite pieces, because he couldn't whittle it down to one.
Gotta do 2. I hear you.
Yeah. was a piece of art that he got while visiting Las Vegas.
Okay. Ooh, I had a comment on that. Keep going.
Okay. And then the other, and this one it resonated with me a little bit, is his Commander Cody piggy bank. It looks like a Gentle Giant bust.
I mean, in this pick, next pick?
I don't know. Can't see the next pick.
I don't see it yet.
It's not on that one. It's not on that one.
Must be down further in his. Oh, there it is. Hold on. Hold the phone. There it is.
There it is. Yeah, it looks like a Gentle Giant bust.
It does.
Very high quality, very vibrant colors. But it's a piggy bank, he says. He said he got it for like $8 in a thrift store or something.
So is this like my colorblind thing? Because I think we already had this argument. I thought Commander Cody was yellow.
That's orange.
That's definitely orange.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, here's a debate. It's the Yanni or what's the other one?
Purple.
Purple. What? No.
Purple and gold or
Purple and gold.
blue and
That's
white.
my thing. It's like whatever. My little receptors pick up yellow on screen, but that's definitely orange in my opinion. All right.
Orange. So what were you going to say about the piece of art?
So here's the deal.
That's the next.
That's the next one. I'm going to put it up right now. So here's the deal. This is an image of a piece of art from Vegas. Now, what I know about this is I obtained a similar piece of art. Now, no piece of art like this can be the same because these are done by street vendors using spray cans, spray paint only. So if you're looking at this on YouTube, it's fascinating.
You think that's a spray can job?
100%. So let me tell you why, because he said he got it from Vegas. What happens is, and I think I have it upstairs. I can show you later, Andy. But
okay.
What happens is they do this whole image with spray cans. Now, Chris can tell me differently, but I'm even looking at Luke and Vader and the X-Wings and the TIE Fighters. I had those the guys, they're artists, obviously, but you can't believe what they can do with the side of cardboard, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and you will get mildly high standing there watching him create it because of all the fumes.
It's a perk,
but it's outside. You can go down. It's I bought mine on in Old Vegas. Gosh, I can't even think of the Vegas shut down. So did my brain. But anyway. What's the old street? Oh, come on. That's what happens when I get into pod. I totally lose everything. Anyway, in Old Vegas, there's lots of street vendors. And,
like by the Nugget?
Yep, by the Nugget, by the Four Queens, by the old Calamity Janes and all that stuff. And they're doing them out on the street along with many other things with less clothing. But this one I bought 2 years ago. Not this exact one, but one similar. So I really liked it when I saw that because I was like, I know that. I wonder if it's the same guy. There's a signature on the bottom right, so I have to check mine to see if it's the same.
That would be cool if it was.
It was. I watched him make it, and then he kind of, when he gets done, he goes, who wants to buy it? And I was like, yeah, I'm buying that.
You know, there's no coincidences in the Force.
That's right.
This would just connect you guys even closer.
What are we called? Diet.
Maybe you Chris and Chris are a dyad.
Dyad, that's what we are.
A diatribe.
Diatribe.
Part of a tribe. A collector tribe.
A collector tribe.
Anyway, thank you, Chris, for sharing. You know, if you listening have a collection of any size that you wouldn't mind sharing with us, go ahead and DM us on Twitter and shoot us over a few pictures of what you got. And we'll post you up one of these weekends.
We will. We'll post you up all these weekends. We love it.
Yeah. Now, Josh, the next part of the podcast is the bulk of the podcast.
Yep. Got to get to it.
We are proud to bring to you an interview where we sat down with executive producer Scott Kinney of Mark Hamill's Pop Culture Quest. Fascinating interview. We could have listened to him for a whole nother hour. It's just a hair over an hour.
I think we might have come up with a new segment though for the Holochronicles, at least once monthly or quarterly. I don't know. But I'm going to call it Story Time with Scott.
Well, definitely keep that in the back pocket and see if we can make that happen.
We'll ask you guys if you want to hear more because I sure do.
If you like stories about original trilogy members and Howard Kazanjian, oh my gosh. It's just story after story. I was just invigorated
Bob Burns.
He's got Bob Burns. He's got a collection of his own that is extensive and
Behind
awesome.
him. It was hard to focus on him when he was talking. I was just,
And he was like, Josh, I'm right here.
my
I'm right here.
My eyes are here, Josh. Yeah.
But no, if you are into collecting, if you are into Mark Hamill and Luke Skywalker and Raiders of the Lost Ark
or Shogun Warriors.
or Shogun Warriors,
Transformers.
man, you are going to really enjoy this next hour. So before we kick it on over to the interview, I do want to remind you that we do have a Patreon now. So if you are interested at all in supporting us in that way, you can go to Patreon/Beyond the Black Doors. And
Blast Doors. Not, he said Black Doors. You went Black Series, Blast Doors, same thing.
Beyond the Blast Doors. And you can support the network in whatever manner you see fit. Thank you for liking, subscribing, sharing.
There you go.
And supporting. Remember, our videos are now on the Beyond the Blast Doors YouTube page.
Hit the bell.
Get that notification. And we appreciate the listen, and we thank you for sharing.
And without further ado,
Mr. Scott Kinney. All right, today's guest on the Holochronicles podcast is a fellow by the name of Scott Kinney. You might know Scott as the executive producer of Mark Hamill's Pop Culture Quest series, which you can see on YouTube and Amazon. Scott, welcome to the show. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that.
welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I mean, if anyone knows me, it's probably Mark Hamill's Pop Culture Quest, a streaming series that I co-created with Mark and a couple of other guys, because we're all collectors. It was a real. The show was very pure from the beginning, and oddly enough, I'm probably more well known on Instagram as just a toy collector than anything else, even the TV show, because I was an early adopter of Instagram just because it kind of fulfilled my desire just to take photos of toys all the time, and nothing else fit the bill like that app, just to take photos of toys. And so my phone roll,
It was like it was made for you.
yeah, it's full of toy pictures. And so then I just started posting them on Instagram and getting all these followers. And in the midst of this, I had this idea for a collector show, but it started out as a toy collector show. And then Toy Hunter happened. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was on Travel Channel.
Yeah.
With Jordan Himbrow. And so when Toy Hunter happened, I'd already been like working on the show idea. My partners and I kind of shifted gears and said, well, let's not make it toy centric because someone's already doing that. And so we'll open it up to just pop culture collectibles in general, like lunchboxes, board games, puzzles, pinball machines, all that kind of stuff. So we just kind of broadened the scope of it from a creative standpoint, and then started pitching it once we kind of, got to where what's the show about? Oh, and we determined this was, I guess I should back up and go through the process, how the show evolved. Me, just a collector. I was doing development work in Hollywood on feature films.
Yeah.
I had no TV experience and very little production experience. I'd done like television commercials and stuff. But the work I was doing was all the creative stuff, like reading screenplays, giving notes to screenwriters, coming up with new pitches, blah, blah, blah. And in the midst of all this, I thought, it'd be fun to do a TV show about toy collecting because I collect toys, something that I like, and I don't know very much. I'm pretty dumb. I mean, I read comic books, you know, and
Makes you a genius in my book. Come on.
yeah, you know, I love sci-fi movies and stuff like that. So, I mean, I spend all my time. I don't read, physics or anything like that. I read, sci-fi, and I think that's, real, real science.
That's just applied physics, right?
Yeah. So, I'm just a nerd. And so I thought a show about what I do other people would connect to it. And, since then you've seen, multiple, the toys that made us and the movies that made us, and lots of great shows and documentaries and YouTube shows, lots of people doing regular weekly YouTube toy collecting or Star Wars collecting type shows. Now it was kind of, 6-7 years ago, it wasn't a thing. It was it was super niche.
Yeah.
It was kind of really, really, really kind of hidden away. You didn't have a lot of vintage toy stores or guys, opening, brick and mortar, shops like you have today. So the toy boom just sort of kicked off, 7 years ago, 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Like literally, pop culture literally became popular, where you got even, hot girls,
What?
doing YouTube
What?
videos about their toy collection. I'm like, where did this come from? This didn't happen, before.
Yeah. So the collectibles kind of came out of the basement now and were for everybody.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that was fun. I mean, I have no complaints about that. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, I love it when it was like underground or something like that,
So the group of guys you got together to do this show, you said you're all collectors too, the 4 or 5 of you?
Yeah. Going back to when I was doing development work in Hollywood, I was introduced to a guy named Darren Moorman, who was also he's an independent film producer, and our orbits, kind of aligned, and we just started trading scripts. And you do that when you meet people in Hollywood. It's like, send me some scripts, dude. That's the thing. And because you're constantly reading scripts. I mean, you want to read every new, you don't want to be behind on what everybody's talking about, like the latest hot spec or something. So he was just a guy I knew, and we became buddies. And I told him one day, I was like, man, I'd really love to do like a documentary type toy collecting show, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, that's a cool idea. I'd like to pitch it to my buddy, Howard Kazanjian.
Nice.
And I knew that name because I'm a Star Wars geek. So I was like, Howard Kazanjian, the producer of Return of the Jedi. And
The guy who won an Emmy.
yeah. And he's like,
The Lost Ark. Yeah.
Yeah. He was VP of Lucasfilm from 77 to 83, the golden year, or 84, something like that.
Yeah.
Like the years. And so I was like, oh, yeah. And so he said, write it out, just give me one page and tell me what the idea is. I'll email it to him, and then we'll get on the phone. So that to me, just talking to Howard on the phone was worth it.
Yeah.
No matter if anything happened, I was just happy to know him. And
Is he a cool guy?
He's super great. And he has a track record in Hollywood that goes back to Hitchcock.
Right.
So he was Hitchcock's first AD on his last few movies or whatever. So, and that was him right out of film school.
Right. Because he met George Lucas at USC, right? If I did my fact check.
That's my understanding. I'm not 100% sure. But that's my understanding, is that they met there. and then reconnected after George, started building Lucasfilm. Essentially, like when George decided Lucasfilm was going to become a big company that he was going to build out, he had to go and hire people. Well, who do you hire in a situation like that? People that you know, people that you trust.
Right.
Yeah. To bring on as your executives and stuff. So that's kind of what George did. I think Howard's a little bit older than George, maybe at just a couple years or something. But anyway, so Howard, he liked the idea. He had me work on it, develop it more, what do episodes look like, etc. So I'm just shooting stuff in the dark. I mean, I'm just making stuff up. At that point, I don't even think Toy Hunter was on. It was just known that they were making it.
Right.
So I didn't know what the show looked like, really. I was just sort of, well, what would I want to watch? That's how to approach it. And so early on, Howard said, I like the idea enough. I think it has potential. I would like to ask your opinion as to whether my friend Mark Hamill would be a good host for the show.
My buddy, name dropper.
Nah.
Yeah. Well, it was really a weird time because The Force Awakens wasn't even announced at that point. In fact, when we started talking about this, the sale of Lucasfilm hadn't happened yet.
Okay.
So when he suggested Mark wasn't he wasn't on everybody's radar back then. Like, he wasn't on TV show. He was doing like guest appearances here and there. But he was mostly just continuing to do his voiceover work, which he's been like a workhorse voiceover artist since, the 90s. And so I was like, I was personally thrilled, but it wasn't like something like, it didn't make me go, oh, well, this will make the show sell for sure.
Right.
Because again, the Star Wars phenomenon, when that happened, I did have, initial phone conversation with Mark. He loved the idea just from a personal standpoint. Like, this is me. This is what I'm into. I would love to do a show about, collectibles, collecting pop culture memorabilia of all, types. And so he was on board just like as an interest thing, like a genuine interest. So we started pitching the show before the Star Wars announcement happened. And what was funny was, people, at the network knew who Mark was. And again, the Star Wars craziness hadn't started up again, and like network executives would hear that he was coming in for a pitch meeting and would like come down to the meeting just to shake his hand and meet him. Like, we went to all the big networks. Like, we went to NBC, Universal, and places like that, Discovery Channel, and they were all like really excited about, doing a show with Mark, but they were like, oh, it's a show about collecting. Just didn't
get it.
Didn't connect with that.
Yeah.
Like at all.
I think there's some wives that can relate to that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, it's like, they'd come back, they call us back and go, well, does this show have to be about collecting? Could it be like a game show with Mark, hosting the game show? And it could be, Star Wars related. It could be pop culture related, but just not, collectibles. And Mark, to his credit, like when people would come back to him and basically try to hire him for another job. Oh, so you're doing TV shows now. We've got this show, so because of the meeting, they would offer him something else.
Yeah.
And he turned him down. He's like, no, I like this. And I'd like it to be, really pure. Like, I don't want it to be about buying and selling, me trying to con somebody into selling me their collectible and looking like I'm ripping them off, stuff like that. He thought that, would be a bad look, like flipping, which it's not an indictment. Mark's not, like anti-dealer or anything like that. He's got some, some negative emotions and things about autograph resellers,
right?
Because he's constantly hounded by him, which I understand. At some point, you just can't take it anymore. Like everywhere you go, people demand your autograph, and he knows the guys that are just there to get his autograph to sell it on eBay or whatever.
Yeah. So does Mark have his own collection then?
Yeah. And that through the course of doing working through the show concept, I already knew he was a collector because back in the 90s, in comic fandom, Mark was kind of, he made Comic Book the movie. He was a regular attendee of the San Diego Comic-Con, not as a guest, but just like walking the show floor type thing.
Cool.
And he would be interviewed, by comic book, magazines and stuff related, magazines about, him being a golden age comic book collector. And so apparently he has like a really nice golden age, like key, collection, golden and silver age. Some, I guess, valuable enough that he keeps them, in a bank vault, doesn't even keep them at home. So, you can imagine, being a guy who like, Mark, he was a geek and a nerd before he was Luke Skywalker. He really was. I mean, I think he said the first time he bought a collectible, he had just graduated from college, I believe the story goes, and he bought at a garage sale someone's Beatles collection or something. So in the early 70s, he got like the bug. And I think one of the other things he did was he repurchased all of the Aurora Monster model kits from the mid 1960s, which he, built when he was in junior high or high school or whatever. And so he started, buying those old model kits. So he was into that in comic books and stuff before, he became,
before he became a collectible.
He became a collectible. He became a pop culture icon,
right?
Which would be weird, to have, that fantasy of being involved in media, sci-fi media or fantasy media or whatever, and then become like the pinnacle hero of the 70s and early 80s. I mean, Luke Skywalker was it. I mean, when I saw the first Star Wars, I was in like third grade or something like that. I was obsessed from then on out, like hardcore, like into it from the first moment, from the crawl.
Wow. What was it like to work with Mark?
It was really good. And, people, sometimes talk about regretting meeting their heroes or whatever. It was a great experience all around. He was always into it, would get completely sidetracked, like talking about some random toy. Like you could mention something to him and he'd go, "Oh, I bought one of those. I remember when those came out." You're like, "Really? You were trolling like Toys R Us like the rest of it?" And he was.
That's cool.
Because that dark period of Star Wars, in between, Jedi, Mark, he chose a different path instead of like, feature films. He chose Broadway and went that direction, and then went into the voiceover thing and kind of resurfaced as a voiceover icon, like out of like a phoenix rising from the ashes. You know, it's like, where's this guy been? Well, it's like he never went away. He just influenced another generations now.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, Joker, his voice of Joker when we were out there interviewing and talking to collectors, that was as big to them as Luke Skywalker, because you had a lot of 90s kids where the Batman animated series was like the best cartoon ever. And they grew up, you know, watching that. So to them, he was like, oh yeah, he's the voice of the Joker. So he was great to work with. Loves to collaborate, loves to talk about collectibles, easy to suck into conversations like that. Like, you know what I mean? So filming stuff is never a problem. All you have to do is just sort of wind him up a little bit. And then he just goes off and can have these conversations with people that will laugh. I mean, we have hours and hours of footage of him just having these conversations with people. And the episodes ended up being like, you know, 10 minutes, or I think the longest one, 16 minutes or something like that. So, but we sold the series, to get back to that story, when Star Wars happened, when The Force Awakens, you know, was announced, and then that, you know, Harrison, Carey, and Mark were going to reprise their roles, everything just kind of blew up. And so we ended up getting, you know, putting together a deal at a startup network, the Comic-Con HQ network, San Diego Comic-Con. They weren't financially behind it. Lionsgate was largely financially behind it, but they licensed the San Diego Comic-Con brand. So they were starting up this new streaming network, and they were just really, I guess, this was 2016. They were just a little ahead of their time. It was just one of those bleeding edge kind of things, you know, because streaming now is so dominant. I mean, your first choice, you know, today is like streaming. Of course, now we're all trapped in the pandemic, you know, and
Thank God for streaming.
The Netflix catalog, you know.
Yeah.
You're watching your third and fourth choices. But, you know, at that time, people were like, how do you watch the show? It's like, well, you have to subscribe to this streaming. They're like, what? Can't it just be on my TV?
Yeah.
Can it just be like a DVD or like on YouTube or something? So that was tough. But, you know, because of the Star Wars hype, you know, we ended up and Force Awakens came out, and, you know, he had this like little bit part, and then he was so busy. I mean, after that, I mean, he toured the world for Force Awakens. I mean, he went, you know, because Lucasfilm basically hired him to be their ambassador. And so he just like toured the world. He went to Japan. He went everywhere.
Yeah.
And just, you know, for the opening of Force Awakens all over the world. And so, you know, we were trying to work on the show, but, you know, he wasn't available, and Lucasfilm had basically hired him out, and understandably, as their ambassador. And then, you know, he went away for the filming of The Last Jedi, and that's when everything kind of came together. Like the network they got their ducks in a row and figured out, you know, when they were going to launch, and they got their budgets and their money and all that stuff. Budgeting and contracts are an absolute nightmare. I mean, they take months and months, and they're like vampires. They drain the life out of you. They're horrible. The arguments. Things will blow up and it's over. Forget it. We're not doing this. I'm not signing this, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the stuff, and, you know, Howard, you know, being, you know, an experienced guy going back to the 1960s in Hollywood, you know, he's real savvy to things. You know, it's like, you know, I would never sign a contract that had this, you know. I mean, he without even having his attorney look at something can go, this is ridiculous. I'm never going to sign this. So because Howard was so savvy in contract negotiations, the good part of the whole thing is, even though the network ultimately cratered, we got to keep ownership of the show and all the footage that we shot.
Well, that's cool. Do you think it has the possibility of, getting picked up by a streaming service again?
Yeah, we've had
Disney Plus or something.
Yeah, we've had discussions off and on with people of all. I mean, you can run the gamut. We've had discussions with Facebook. We've had discussions with Amazon Prime. We've had discussions with Netflix. And Netflix ultimately kind of had gone down the path of the toys that made us about the time that we started having discussions with them.
Yeah.
So they kind of had a show that they were doing already that was in that vein. And that's fine, because I love the toys that made us, and I'm so glad that show exists, that series exists, and the movies that made us. Those are great guys. I got to know them actually a little bit while we were filming Pop Culture Quest, because I was in Burbank for a couple months and got to know a lot of the collectors there while we were filming.
That's cool.
And so those guys, Rich and the rest of them, they're real collectors too. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
Well, let's.
I got way off track there.
No,
that's an
great.
awesome story.
Yeah, I'm just absorbing it all and trying to imagine being in your shoes. Your job is to make a show about something that you're passionate about, and you get to work with a hero of yours to do it. Like, that seems like all of the best things meeting together. And then you've got Howard in your ear too, giving you advice. Like, man, it just seems like the best of all worlds kind of coming together for that. That must have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, filming days were the best days of my life. I hate to say I've peaked, but I can't. I can't really top those days. I mean, when we would have downtime, and when you're filming, sets are often really boring because setups take hours. Mm-hmm. So you'll say, okay, we filmed here, blah blah. Let's film. We already scouted out this location. We want to film this little segment back over in this corner of the building. Okay, so that's going to take a couple hours, and then we'll be ready to film. And so you're all just like sitting around. And so sometimes, Mark had to like decompress, and he'd need to be alone, and he would look over our scripts and our notes and all that kind of stuff, because he didn't memorize things. He tried to internalize them.
Yeah.
So, and it was fine because it's a documentary series. It's not like when he was in the booth, doing voiceovers, obviously he just had a script in front of him. But when you're on camera and you're just interacting with a collector, you just kind of want to have the bullet points of what I want to discuss, kind of internalize what questions I want to ask, so he would, sometimes I'd have downtime just sitting next to Mark talking, shooting the breeze about anything. And then sometimes it would just, be me and another crew member, or sometimes it'd just be me and Howard. But when Howard would start telling a story, it's kind of a funny phenomenon. By the time he finished the story, there'd be like 5 or 6 people sitting around him just listening to the story, because they were very good stories.
Oh, yeah.
His stories about, working with Peter Sellers and people like that and their antics on set and stuff. It was just like amazing. So it was all good. And then, I also heard lots of spoilers about The Last Jedi. I mean, I knew what the movie was because he had just come off when we started filming, that he finally finished his shooting obligations for Last Jedi, flew back to the United States, and he said, guys, I need a week just not doing anything.
Right.
Like, I've been over there, for months and months. And he did that video game while he was over there too. The crowdfunded one. Wing Commander, the sequel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they use
He filmed that
his
like
likeness.
simultaneously, like the mocap stuff on that while he was filming Last Jedi. So he would leave the Last Jedi set and go to the studio and film. I think it's Star Citizen. I think it's the name of it. People can Google it, but
yeah, I've seen the commercials for it. They use his likeness in it and everything, and yeah.
And he acted out all the scenes mocap.
Yeah.
So I mean, he spent weeks or maybe months doing that. So he had really long days, and he was like super exhausted when he got back to the States, and so we didn't talk to him for like a week, but. I mean, he came into the office, our production offices that we had set up in Burbank, and we started filming 2 days later. So it was like totally hitting the ground running. We had never worked with each other. I mean, I'd worked with him over the phone and on email for years, literally. Mm-hmm. And we had some personal interactions, but they're very limited. Like we'd have a meeting and we'd get together for an hour, in Malibu or something. But so we didn't have this working relationship. And then like 2 days later, we were like filming. So it was, and they're like, 12-hour days, and you got 5 weeks to get the whole, first season in the can. And so we were just making it up as we went along. And fortunately, we let the collectors sort of tell the stories. Like we'd find the collector, because we didn't want to do all Star Wars. We didn't want to do all comic books. We didn't, we tried to really, we did an episode on, shoe collecting. We did a pinball episode, kind of pinball / arcade episode, and, toys, and we did the Boba Fett episode. We did 2 episodes on prop collecting. So anyway, we tried to diversify, that you didn't, the assumption is every episode needs to be about Star Wars. And I think some people wanted every episode to be Star Wars, but Mark's totally not. Yeah. He doesn't hate Star Wars, but he's also, to some extent, he gets bored with it too.
Sure. He's more than just that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so I love Star Wars. Star Wars made my career, and Star Wars made so many things in my life possible. But the fans know more about Luke Skywalker than I know,
Yeah. So,
on set, I heard everything about Last Jedi. I knew that Mark was kind of, he wasn't like real excited, or he didn't. I don't think he understood the direction, the character went, him personally, like his idea of who Luke Skywalker was. And that came across to me, and that was disappointing to me, 6 months before, the movie came out, that the guy that played the character was like confused.
Yeah.
By it. But, it was for me to listen to Mark describe the movie. And again, when you're acting in a movie, you don't even know the whole story. You just know like the scenes that you're in pretty much. Mm-hmm. 'Cause a lot of times, on big budget films like this, the actors don't get the whole script. They just get their sides, like their daily parts. They get to read the screenplay in advance, but they don't even get to keep it, like, and ruminate on it. They read it in a room and then have to leave it behind or whatever.
Yeah, on to the next.
Yeah. So, that.
So do you think after it was done, he felt better about it once he got to see it all together?
I think he came around to the idea that it was the director's artistic vision, mm-hmm. and that he's kind of a respecter of that. Like, that's not my choice, but I'm not the director. So I gave the director my inputs and thoughts, and then I played the role however they asked me to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's that's 'cause he's a pro,
Yeah. They didn't hire him. They didn't, they didn't hire him to write it.
Right.
They didn't hire him to direct it. They hired him to play this character.
Yeah.
So he understands that.
Yeah.
You know, he would have wrote it differently, but Mark would be the first to admit, I don't know if anyone would have liked that either.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. Yeah.
That might have stunk.
Well, so out doing this show, I would imagine you've seen some pretty crazy things in some collections. Like, what's maybe like one or two of the craziest, like most outlandish collector pieces that you've gotten to see through your experience in this show?
I think I was most overwhelmed, even though the prop store in Los Angeles is phenomenal. It's like a warehouse of props. And that was amazing. And I mean, there were pieces like, original like puppets from, like Gremlins and Rick Baker stuff, and amazing, and outfits and costumes and masks. I think the thing that blew me away was Bob Burns. He's a prop collector, and Bob is well known in Hollywood as a collector. He started collecting in the late 1940s as a teenager.
Oh boy.
Hollywood memorabilia and props. And then he ended up being a makeup artist, and he starred in some films and did stunt work and all kinds of things. Long career. He was Rick Baker was kind of Bob's protege. Rick Baker knew Bob when Rick was a teenager, and Bob taught him how to do makeup applications and stuff. So the guy's a legend, but I knew all that. I knew those things. I knew who Bob was. I'd seen him in magazines. I'd seen spreads in magazines of some of his collection. I'd read interviews with him and articles and stuff, because I grew up loving Famous Monsters magazine and stuff like that. So, but when I went inside Bob's house, it just blows your mind that it's somebody's private collection, and it's Hollywood history, from the Universal monster movie era up till now. And directors like, James Cameron and Peter Jackson give him things like, just give it to him. Here, Bob, I want you to have this. I thought about cool. You. You should have this. So he has like, back in the 80s, in the heyday of like fantasy films, Bob was already a well-known enough collector that, Cameron knew who he was a fan, and would give him like props from Aliens and T2 and stuff.
Oh my God.
Like way back in the day. But Bob kind of became like fan famous because he did these haunted houses at his house in the 70s and early 80s. And he lives in Burbank in a pretty small house. It's hard to imagine that he has all that stuff crammed in his house. It's so unassuming. When you pull up, you're like, it's not a gate. It's not a mansion. It's like a house. Like, I don't know how many square feet it is, maybe, because he's added on to it just because of the collection. I don't know, 2,000 square feet, 2,500, something like that. It's not like massive house or anything. So he became famous. He did these Halloween shows where he would put on in his front yard. He'd put on these elaborate shows. And one year, I think it was Halloween 1979 or Halloween 1980. I can't remember, but it was right during the era of the first Alien movie. He decided to do an alien haunted house in his front yard. And because he was friends with so many like makeup guys in Hollywood, they got him stuff like an alien like head that was screen used, and pieces, bits and bobs, from the set, like real set pieces and stuff that he could incorporate in his haunted house. So he built this like an elaborate haunted house. And Walter Koenig, Chekhov from Star Trek, was one of the actors in his. He talked him into doing this for free.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, and they did like hundreds of shows a night. I guess there was like a line around the block just to get into the thing, and apparently executives from 20th Century Fox went to the show that night and asked him if he wanted some more of the props from the film or something, and they literally gave him like a truckload of stuff.
Jeez.
Just gave it to him, just said, here you go. I mean, just dropped it off at his house. So I think that night, that event made him like super fandom famous. Not like in fact, I take it back. Household name. I think E.T. like Entertainment Tonight. Remember that show?
Yeah.
I think they did like a segment on his haunted house or something like that. So I think he actually entered sort of like the mainstream for a little period of time. So anyway, Mark knew who Bob was, obviously, had known who he was probably since the 1970s, and had been invited to Bob's house, but had never been there. So that was amazing. So we always tried to hold Mark back, like not let him see stuff, so that when he came in, you could get like a real reaction, like to him looking at things. So that was great. I think that was my favorite moments were at Bob's house. And I think Mark's too, from the way just his rosy glow, like all day long. Like he was so happy to be there. Cause when you're seeing things, Bob has the original, King Kong, that little, that metal skeleton that they built the flesh and the fur on, that Willis O'Brien did the stop motion. He has that original Kong. I forgot that what they call it, but it's the metal skeleton essentially that they use for the stop motion. So all the joints move and everything. And that's a piece that would easily be valued over $1 million.
Jeez.
Cause it's the ultimate fantasy film. I mean, the first Kong, so many people, even people like, Peter Jackson will say that was the movie that like inspired me to make fantasy films. That first King Kong, which made way back in the 1930s. Mark he's the same way. He's like, that film was so, transformative for me. It just like, it had a huge impact on me as a kid. So him holding that and them talking about that film was amazing, because it goes back to the origins of those guys. Like what made you a fan? And both of them had like this common love of King Kong, which was awesome.
That's ridiculous. So that was your favorite, like most awe-inspiring collection then, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And what was weird was, on set, I'm not a production guy, so I don't do lights. I mean, I can do all that stuff. I've done all that stuff on my own little, like low budget, productions and stuff, but like, I'm not in a union. I can't touch things. I can't move things, It's like, what are you doing? You don't do that. So when we were filming, all I was there for was for a consultation. So every once in a while, I would hear Mark say something like, what are we talking about here? Let's get Scott. I don't know what I'm talking about, so I just look at the script and go, remember we talked about this? This is the, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah. So that's it. I mean, every once in a while a question would pop up, but we had like seasoned pros. Like Jeff Conroy was another one of our executive producers, and Ice Road Truckers and Deadliest Catch and Storage Wars, and shows like that. Like Jeff has executive produced shows of that caliber, the biggest, sort of reality shows on television, Jeff has experience there. So it's like we were in trouble if they asked me anything like important, so while they were filming, I was like completely lost in Bob's collection. Like, cause Bob didn't care. He would like hand me stuff. So here, you want to hold this? Are you supposed to touch these things? You're supposed to hold them. He's like, it's fine. You can touch it.
That'd make me nervous.
He's like, I touch them all the time. I touch these things all the time. I love to connect with that history.
Yeah.
And I like to share that feeling with other people.
Still make me nervous though.
That's such a good collector though. We always appreciate collectors that share their collections. And while, you got to hold something sacred, they're okay with like, go ahead, hold it, Yeah. Especially something like that. You'd be worried about like the oils on your hands and all those things, right?
Do I need to put on gloves first before I touch these things?
He's like I don't know. He comes from an era of collectors where it was like, I remember when this stuff was a liability, like people didn't want it in their warehouse. Like get it out. It's just taking up space.
Right.
And now everything's like, the value, or whatever. And Bob, I mean, he's aware of those things because he spends money to acquire stuff.
Right.
And on occasion, he told us stories where he couldn't afford things. He tried to buy them at auction and he's like, the price just, it got to a level I could, even though I've got a lot of rich friends and maybe even have people, buying stuff for him, stuff starts going so high. He's got Star Wars props. He's got Rick Baker props that I guarantee he couldn't buy because Rick Baker gave them to him, but they're, like masks from like the Cantina creatures from A New Hope. He's got that stuff in his collection.
It's just fantastic. No big deal. Just a Cantina mask just sitting over there.
Well, speaking of collections, Scott, we heard through the grapevine, and of course, like we said before we started going here, from our good buddy Matt from Enid. That's how he's known on Twitter. Yeah, cool guy. Love the guy. He keeps us on our toes, man. He's never. I don't think a day's gone by where we don't get a DM from Matt with a couple questions. So love the fandom there. We heard that you may have something in your collection, which of course we're kind of a Star Wars primary collector show. What do you got? Come on. What do you got there? You got a tooth, I heard.
Yeah. I don't own any, I'm not a prop collector. I'm more of a toy collector and I collect comic books, but mostly toys. And so, when we were filming the show, I didn't really acquire anything for my collection. I bought a few little things here and there. And one segment was kind of embarrassing because I was caught on camera buying stuff in a store while we were filming. And they ended up putting it in kind of the end credits of one of the episodes. But Mark kind of made fun of me, But after the show was over, at one point, Howard Kazanjian knew that I had experienced buying and selling toys. And he said, I've got some stuff I want to sell. And he just kind of, mentioned that Kenner gave him like one of everything, or LucasFilm gave him one of everything. And I was like, Howard, if you want to sell stuff, I'll help you sell it. And I was like, but why do you want to sell it? And he was like, it just doesn't, it meant something to my kids, but the collectible, the toys and stuff just didn't mean anything to me. To me, it was like, that was like part of my job. It was like overseeing a lot of that stuff and approving. And I guess to him, it represents a lot of work, not necessarily fun. Cause I know that he's one of those guys that at LucasFilm was probably involved in a million different things. And, you know, because at that time, you know, they had the Indiana Jones films going, they had the Star Wars films going, and then they started doing special effects for other movies and growing Lucasfilm. And so I'm sure he was just like, kind of like, you know, the stuff that means something to him is different. Like he is attached to his film props. So I sold some of his toys that he'd been given by Lucasfilm to other collectors, and he gave me the Sarlaac prop tooth as just like a gift. He said, "I thought you'd want it." Like,
No big deal.
I thought maybe you'd be
I thought
interested
you would
in this.
want it because he sent it to me, and I was like, I'm not a prop seller. He sent this to me, and so I called him. I was like, "How come you sent this? Did you want me to sell it? I don't even know how to price something like this." And he goes, "No, I just thought you'd want it." I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah." So I you know, it's something I probably couldn't afford, but I was thrilled to have it. And so he told me the story of, you know, the Sarlaac. You know, they built in a pit there in the Buttercup Valley in California, out in the desert, and the teeth on the side, the walls are foam, and they're just a bunch of them glued in rows. And he said, when we were done filming and we were wrapped, I told my assistant, and I can't remember the guy's name. He told me his assistant's name, and he is a guy that went on to do other things in Hollywood. I just can't remember. But he said, go tear off all those teeth, because they're going to destroy all that. They're going to burn it or bury it or whatever they did, probably both. And because they're out in the middle of the desert, and it cost them a ton of money to transport it out there, and they sure weren't going to transport it out. But so the guy went down there and tore a bunch of them off, and Howard kept them. And he said, I've just kind of given them as gifts, and here and there. I've never, because I asked him at one point, I think I posted a photo of it on Facebook, in one of the Facebook groups or something, or whatever, on social media. And somebody messaged me and said, is Howard selling these? And I said, I don't think so. I didn't get the impression that he's selling them. And they said, well, one of them sold like, you know, early 2000s at an auction. Did he sell that? And it was somebody trying to acquire one. You know, they were just trying to get to, you know, whether Howard would sell them a tooth.
Right.
And so I emailed Howard and I said, did you sell any of these in the past? And he said, no, I've never sold one. But he said, my assistant, the guy that tore them off, kept some. And I think a few years ago he did sell some at auction or whatever. But he said, no, I've never sold one. Well, the guy that was bugging me to get Howard to sell him one, Howard gave him one. So
Criminy. All right. What? Yeah. Howard's email address? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, they were friends. And I guess the guy didn't want to just come out and ask Howard, like, can I have this gift of a tooth? How do you get on this gift list?
Right.
Or whatever. But I think he finally just asked him, can I have one of those, or can I buy one of those? And you know, Howard has sold some of his, in addition to his toys, I think he has sold other props and memorabilia. I think he's holding on to like some of the Holy Grail type stuff. I know he has a Vader helmet from Empire in his house. He has an Ark of the Covenant miniature that ILM built and shot, and he has a complete Stormtrooper costume from Jedi that has never been opened. He sealed it in a crate in the UK. When they were done filming, he said, I had them build a Stormtrooper on dummy, gun, everything, seal it in a crate, and ship it to the U.S. And he said, I've had it in storage ever since. And
another Ark of the Covenant right there.
Yeah. So it would be fun just to do an episode of Howard
cracking that open.
At it. What if it was all just like black, like everything?
Oh yeah, like something leaked.
Or
The foam in it disintegrated or something.
Yeah. So
my heart.
It becomes like Al Capone's vault, or something, you know. But that we joked about that. But you know, Howard, he thinks it's kind of fun to have this time capsule.
Yeah. Well, he's not wrong. That would be cool.
Wrong at all, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So in your collection, you've got a lot of different stuff, not just Star Wars. Is Star Wars the biggest part of your collection, or is something else?
It's like about a quarter of it. I mean, I think when I started getting serious about toy collecting, I'd collected on and off since college, because when I got out of college, it was kind of like a golden era of, it was like the early 90s, and KB Toys would like blow out like all these toy lines like Thundercats and Silverhawks and stuff like that. And so I'd go and I would buy, like 3 figures for $1, like from the 80s. And it was in the early 90s. They're blowing stuff out. So I'd buy stuff like that and hanging on the wall and stuff, but I wasn't real serious. But when I got into it, Star Wars was probably the hook to get me like really collecting again, because I think the first obsession I got was to get all of the original figures, just to get one of all the original run. And I didn't have all of them as a kid. Yeah. So that was above and beyond, some people just collect what they had as a kid. I just kind of expanded to what I would have wanted as a kid that I didn't have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've collected well beyond my childhood. But yeah, Star Wars it seems like an endless well of collecting. Even if you limit it to vintage, it goes on and on and on and on and on. Like when you get into the foreign stuff, and the knockoff stuff,
and the variants and all the
yeah. And so you can never really reach the end of it. And I know some people that are like the closest to being at the end of it, but they still don't have everything. Like it seems like it's just impossible.
So do you just collect the vintage then, or do you keep up with some of the modern stuff too?
I bought. I was very proud of myself. I bought a Mandalorian. Black series. No, I collect modern stuff. Like if something really kind of just talks to me, I'll buy it. I don't collect a lot of modern stuff because I have my eyes set on so many vintage pieces that are going to cost me so many dollars.
Right.
Like I have things on my list that I know if I get lucky, it's hundreds of dollars, and most likely it's going to be closer to, 1,000 or more. Which is like, that's a low end collector. I mean, there's guys that like drop 10, 15, 20.
Yeah.
And then these, Boba Fett prototype collectors, dropping $85,000. I don't know how I would do it if I had the money, of course.
Well, you'd have to sell everything else to get it.
Yeah. Like, your whole collection, maybe you could get that, but, and then a bank loan. But, to me, when I buy a modern thing, I'm like, I still have these other things on my list. So it's usually just something that I really, really like. I love obviously, like everybody loves Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I got hooked on that series, and I would buy more of the Mandalorian figures, but I can't ever find them.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Nope. They're rare right now.
If we take away the Star Wars out of your collection, what's the thing for you?
Shogun Warriors is another toy line. You can, in fact, those are kind of, let's see.
Kind of right behind you there. Yeah.
The other side,
Yep.
those big giant plastic robots.
Yeah.
They came out in the States around the same time that Star Wars toys came out. So this was a real like first world problem in the 70s. Was first Christmas 77, there wasn't any Star Wars toys. There was like, I think Star Wars Play-Doh and a Star Wars board game and the comic books.
Yeah.
and the trading cards and stuff like that. But the toys, so Christmas 77, you had to expand your mind and play with other toys, even though you wanted Star Wars. So Micronauts from Mego came out that year, and Shogun Warriors came out. And so those were kind of what you had to play with instead of Star Wars toys. So at the time, I didn't appreciate them, because I really wanted a Millennium Falcon or whatever. Mm-hmm. So Christmas 78, was like all Star Wars, baby. But, that 77 Christmas was kind of like I wish this was Luke Skywalker, but, but I now I appreciate those toys because I did play with them. I mean, I did love them.
Sure.
It's, I wanted Star Wars, but I had a great time with those toys. And so now I appreciate the Japanese toys that were imported into the States, because at that time there was kind of a little bit of a Japanese invasion happening with their properties like Star Blazers and Battle of the Planets. And, I can't remember the other show. It was a live action show that came on in the States early. But anyway, so some of their cartoons and live action shows were starting to be imported in the US in the late 70s. And it was kind of and then in the 80s, it really took off because, that got solidified with Transformers, which Transformers was probably by far the biggest Japanese import of all time to the US. I mean, it became a giant global phenomenon. But those were the early days of the sort of the Japanese mecha and robots and things like that. So that's a collection. The US releases, which are separate from there was the original Japanese releases, and then the US releases they got repackaged, renamed, sometimes altered a little bit, and then called Shogun Warriors in the States. So I'm a fan of the US releases. I do appreciate the original Japanese stuff, but it's another rabbit hole that's endless. It's like people are like, how come you don't collect the Japanese figures? I'm like, well, these are technically, they're all made in Japan, so these are Japanese figures, but the original figures, there's hundreds, and so, it's always the limit of space, money,
Yeah.
Scott, I'm thinking, because obviously we can only go so long tonight, but I'm thinking like a new segment for us will just be collector story time with Scott. And we get on like once a month. I just want to hear these stories, for hours. So let's just cut them up and let's do a collector story time. Cause I think you could talk about,
Let's start.
I know this is tip of the iceberg stuff here.
Yeah. Let's start a collection of Scott stories.
That's what I want.
Yeah. I love collecting stories. And you hear this, it's common. You'll hear it with other collectors. They'll say, "Oh, I love the story about this piece."
Yeah.
How they found it, who owned it, what their backstory was. And so that's something I really appreciate about my collection is I'm not a big eBay buyer. I like to go find stuff. I do buy things on social media. I do buy things on Instagram and Facebook. Those have been great tools for finding things. Like I'll post a picture of something and say, anybody ever seen one of these? Because I really like one. And maybe weeks or months will pass and I'll get like a DM from somebody saying, so-and-so has one of those for sale.
Right.
That's been awesome. But I really like the meeting people, going to their house or, whatever the circumstance is. And then them telling me, they got this from their brother, their cousin. I mean, I don't have a lot from my childhood because I gave away a lot of my toys to my cousin when I went into high school. So I only have a few pieces from my childhood, like a few little figures, a lunchbox, a few magazines, comics. but not anywhere near the toy collection I had as a kid. But I kept my AT-AT. You can.
I saw him.
Yeah.
There he is.
He's right up there.
Right up top there.
That was my cousin's AT-AT, and we both got that for Christmas. I got one, and he got one the same Christmas, probably Christmas '83, because I know it was Return of the Jedi era, and we both got one for Christmas, and his parents kept his in their attic, and he wanted me to sell his collection this 5-6 years ago. His parents kept everything in the attic. So he got all the tubs down and all the boxes down, and I went through it all, and it was such a flood of memories because I can remember him getting some of that stuff. All mine's gone, but here's his. And that AT-AT, I just bought it from him, because I was like, man, I wish I had mine. This is the closest I have to that that you got this the same Christmas.
That's awesome.
That is very cool. Scott, as you've been talking and telling your stories, we on our social medias, we try and feature a followers collection every Saturday. People will send us some pictures and we'll post them up. And, they've been collecting this long. This is their favorite piece. And they just get to share a little bit of what they have. And we find that to be a lot of fun and engaging, kind of get to know each other a little bit in the collecting community, because it really is pretty vast. Like, it's the collector community, even if you just limit to Star Wars, is very vast. But you've touched on some things. We also try to give collector tips too, and you touched on a few that have resonated with us too. Like you said, well, the next on my list. So you have a list, at least a list in your mind, or if it's written out, of kind of like what you're going to get next. And, if you buy this, that's cool, but it's kind of taking the place of something on the list already. So, you're constantly prioritizing what you have. Do you actually have a physical list of things you're trying to check off, or is it just in your mind?
The most organized I've ever been in my life with collecting is my Star Wars comic. I'm trying to get all of the Marvel run, and you can see on my phone I have a notepad of my. I keep now a list, and for the longest time I was like, how come I have because I know collectors that have like spreadsheets and stuff that they're,
right
on, Google Docs, and they'll pull up their Excel, and they're like, oh, at a toy show. I'm like, dude, So, I got with the 21st century and put a notepad of like my Marvel comic Star Wars needs, but the rest of it, I'm so visual that I literally have a folder on my desktop that's full of toy pictures.
Okay.
And the folder is called Scott Wants These Toys. So I go in,
very creative.
Every once in a while I go in the folder and I delete something out of the folder, and I'm like, okay, mission accomplished.
Checked off the list.
Nice.
Yeah. But I do visual checklists too, so that I can post them on Instagram or Facebook. And like with the Shogun Warriors, that's the only line of toys that I've ever tried to get all of them.
Okay.
Some of them are pretty doable. Like if you look at some toy lines, that just didn't last very long, like Tron, right, or Battlestar Galactica, or, things that just kind of, one and done, one Christmas, or, maybe a 2-year run. And it's very doable. Indiana Jones, the Kinney collection, very, doable, because there's just not a ton of toys. So, but this is Shogun Warriors is a pretty large run. I think they lasted 3 years in the US. And because they weren't creating the toys and the molding and the tooling and all that stuff from scratch, they were importing all that stuff from Japan. They could just import as much as they wanted.
Yeah.
So they did a ton of releases under the Shogun Warriors banner. So that's an ambitious one, but it's also doable. and I've been working on it, roughly about 10 years, and I'm down to about 6 or 7 pieces.
Ooh.
Okay.
To get all of them. And so, I keep an updated post of those 6 or 7 pieces that I can just post a picture of it and say, here's the 6 I'm looking for, and network, because they're the ones I don't have. They're typically the ones that are the hardest to find. It's sort of like when you're collecting Star Wars figures and you get down to Yak Face.
Right.
Damn it.
Yeah. And I got to that place too. I remember getting to the point in the collection where it was like, well, it's just Yak Face.
It's just Yak
We all
Face.
know we're going to have to pay for this. There's just no, unless you get really lucky. And that's the thing, with trying to complete something on a budget. If you're on a budget, you're just going to have to be patient.
Yep.
Because you can find stuff for cheap. You can find it at a garage sale. You can find it at a flea market. You can, but you can't control the timing of that. If, good, fast, and cheap, pick any two. So
that's a great collector tip right there. Scott, we want to thank you so much for, you've been sharing with us for just over an hour now. And, one thing that Mark Hamill says at the beginning of the Pop Culture Quest is that he gets to keep collecting through you. And by you, it's all of us. So that's one thing that I know Josh has really gotten to appreciate. Maybe he doesn't have to get everything. Maybe we don't have to get everything, but we can appreciate what each other has. And, when we see it somewhere else, we're like, that's awesome. I got to get you out of here on this last question, though. And it's going to be a tough question.
Mm-hmm. A real zinger.
Yeah. And it's been building up to this, Scott. So be ready. Unfortunately, there's a fire in your house. Everybody gets out safe, but you can only grab one thing. What do you grab?
One toy. I mean, you grab your kids and your dog, but after that,
since you do have two hands, maybe you can grab two things.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. I guess I might say my Alien. I love the Kenner Alien, the 18-inch Alien, a lot. It's such an iconic toy, and I was obsessed with it when I was trying to get one in a box. I was obsessed with that toy. I don't know. I guess I really do have a connection to it.
That's cool.
I probably would grab it.
That's
all right.
fine.
Well, you know what? You seem to answer that pretty quickly, so that has to be the right answer.
It's got to be right. If it popped in first, then there you go.
Yeah.
Scott, where can people find you if they want to follow you or like you said, you're on some of the social medias. I know you're probably out there, like collecting from your side, but.
Yeah, probably Instagram. I post only toys or comics. So it's KIDKOSMIC Kid Cosmic, Instagram.com/Kid Cosmic.
Awesome.
It's also your Twitter handle too.
It is. Yeah. So, going back to my AOL, login or whatever, Kid Cosmic from the 90s. But, so I think, people that are collectors will probably enjoy that feed the most.
Awesome.
Cool. And you have, just from what I read in your little bio, you have a show in post-production now. You want to give that a little plug?
Yeah, it's the Game Chasers. If you just type in Game Chasers on YouTube, you'll find out. They have a channel, and I have been following those guys. They've been doing it 8 or 9 years, where they just film themselves going out and buying vintage video games.
Oh, cool!
It's a real. I mean, it's. Reality shows where they go and find things and acquire them. So much of it is staged and fake and stuff. because you're paying a crew, tens of thousands of dollars a day, so you can't not find anything.
Right.
So you're going to find something every time. But they go and they film, flea markets and garage sales and stuff and find nothing in this film. They'd like make an episode of that. And so I loved their show. And I met him once at a convention. I was selling toys. I was set up as a dealer selling toys, and they bought some stuff off of me. And we have mutual friends, and they raised money to make a motion picture based on their exploits. They play themselves in the movie, and they kind of tell their origin story of why they're so obsessed with video games, retro games. And they approached me about producing it, and I jumped on board. I was like, yeah, this sounds like a lot of fun. It's the most physical production I've ever done, and it's hard work. I don't recommend it. It's really like producing a film. Like my cushy job on Pop Culture Quest, I was an executive producer. I mean, I had like an assistant, I had an office, and I was just pampered and didn't have to carry stuff. When you're working on an indie film, you have to do anything and everything in the moment. Like, we need this, we need a fire, we need to figure out where we can build a fire and do this. And we need to do it in 30 minutes because we're losing the light. And you just have to like throw things together. Like, how are we going to do this? Okay. You and you come with me, and we're going to, so they're long, long days. 12-hour shoot days is pretty normal, but when you're producing, those 12-hour days, can become 16-hour days. So you go to bed, you wake up, at like 4, you get to the set by, 5 or 6, and you have all these things you have to get done before you start filming at 9. And, you're like stressing that 4 hours, like trying to get everything done, to start filming at 9 or whatever. And so, but I think the movie turned out really good. I'm hoping, I've seen like an assembly cut, which is really long. But there's we need to do a few little reshoots and things. But anyway, if you go to YouTube, type in Game Chasers, you'll find their channel. You can find out how to support. You can order the digital download. You can pre-order it. I think it's $12 for a digital download or something like that. Or you can order a Blu-ray or whatever. But it's a movie about collectors. So if you're into retro, vintage, 80s stuff, we very much wanted it to have a Goonies, Spielberg vibe to it. We did our best to give it that vibe, we do have some flashback sequences in the movie where we have kids playing them in the 80s. And that was a lot of fun to do because, building the sets and everything to look like your house in 1987 or whatever. That was a lot of fun.
That sounds awesome.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Scott. I appreciate it, and hope to stay in touch with you. This has just been a lot of fun listening to stories and your experiences and the things. I don't know. There was things that you were talking about where I was like, yeah, man, I can relate. And then just having to get to listen to your experiences was pretty awesome.
Yeah, so. I'm not joking. Story time with Scott. It's going to happen.
Yeah,
if you agree.
Yeah, think of something, and let's do it.
I'm down. Once a month, I'm down.
All right.
Well, thanks
Scott.
again, Scott. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.